Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today and for being flexible on the time of this seminar. I want to especially thank our speakers for rearranging their schedules to be able to be with us today. If you've joined us before, Illini Aero Connections is a seminar series aimed at connecting our alumni with our current student body to discuss topics that may not get covered in the classroom. So today we're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And I want to thank Alfred Tang and Carlos Almeida very much for volunteering to work with us on this seminar. We're so happy that you were able to join us today. Alfred Tang is a 2012 graduate of Aerospace Engineering. He is currently working on his master's in mechanical engineering at North Carolina State University. He began his career with Zodiac Aerospace and in 2015 joined Collins Aerospace. Carlos Almeida is a 2013 graduate of Aerospace Engineering. He also has an MS in mechanical engineering from The Ohio State University. And I just want to thank you both for joining us today. I'm going to turn this over to you now to go ahead and give you a more in-depth introduction to both of these individuals.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Courtney.
Yeah, thank you, Courtney. That's a nice introduction. Right.
So how do I share then, Courtney? I think...
Yes, give me 1 second. It's not popping up there. I have to stop sharing.
It's virtual working is complicated. Okay. That should be working.
All right. Hi. So I guess I'll go first. So as Courtney said, I was a 2012 graduate, and right now working on my mechanical engineering master's. Took me a while to figure out my career interests, so that's why a little later. But so currently I'm working at Collins Aerospace, more specifically in their interiors division, mostly specializing in mechanical design, and right now I'm doing some composite materials. And outside of work, I love aviation. That's why I'm always, my heart is always with aerospace, and love traveling and playing hockey and working out kind of stuff. So, but what I want to talk about today is my diversity work, my work in diversity, both back when I was in UFI and also at Collins Aerospace. So, next slide.
Cool. And hello, everybody, and thanks for joining during this lunchtime. Just to give you a quick introduction of who I am, like Courtney mentioned, I graduated in 2013 from Illinois, and my hometown is Chicago. And now I'm a senior manufacturing manager at GE Renewables, and I'm also the GLBTA Alliance co-leader. And that's for the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender, and Allies Alliance at GE. I included a little blurb so that you could get familiar with what we do at GE Renewable Energy. But think of things like windmills, wind turbines, hybrid solutions, as in like solar, battery solutions. That's what the business is that we do now. After Illinois, I got my master's, and I worked at GE Aviation as a design engineer and systems engineer. I was living in Cincinnati and thought that I was a little bit tired of living in Cincinnati, and joined GE Corporate, where GE Corporate took me around the different locations that GE has, and got finance and supply chain experience, and that's how I ended up in my current role, which is outside of engineering. And I just included some 5 random facts about me. The craziest thing is that I've been living out of a suitcase for the past 4 years. So I visited 53 countries, the large majority of those through GE, and have lived in 27 cities. So now I'm based out of Chicago, so I'm happy that I have a home to call home. So that's a little bit of a snippet. And like Alfred mentioned, we'll be talking about sort of diversity and inclusion. Alfred will dive into the specifics of his experience at Illinois, and then how that's evolved to his current status now as a leader within Collins Aerospace. And then I'll talk more about the bigger, how do you step outside of that, and what can you do now as in your current roles, or can you get involved? So Alfred will take us through his journey there.
Right. Okay, so in this presentation, we use the term DEI or DNI. It stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me, it all started back during my sophomore year when someone tapped my shoulder and said, "Hey, we're interested in starting a group for specifically for LGBTQ plus people in the STEM field, and especially in engineering, because traditionally it has been very conservative, and especially in aerospace, both the way we do things and um, the field itself is very conservative, right? So some of you can relate to it if you are already working in industry. And so back in 2009, someone asked me, "Hey, do you want to help us start up this group called OSTEM, which stands for Out in Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics?" I said, "Yes, okay, I'll join," and I'll join as a member. And a little later in 2010, and they wanted someone to help as the engineering council, you should be saying that, engineering council representative, just so it has a voice in the engineering council meetings. So that's how I got on the executive board, and then later on as joined as the treasurer in my senior year. So that's how we got started. Throughout the time when I was in OSTEM, we had different kinds of events. So not just LGBTQ related, but we also have professional development events like um, um, dining etiquettes, resume workshops. We invited like big corporations to speak to us, so stuff like that. So it's a kind of a hybrid of your LGBTQ plus RSOs and your engineering RSOs. So, and other than that, we also went to national conferences. We had joint events with other STEM organizations and other LGBTQ plus organizations. So our mission is to promote DNI for LGBTQ plus students in the STEM field. Yeah. Next slide. So those experience really really connected me to where I'm at today. So later on in my career, I joined my current company, and after rounds of mergers, which is pretty typical in the aerospace field, I had the opportunity, and someone again tapped my shoulder and asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in starting an ERG?" And then I was like, "Okay, I have some experience back on campus." Then I basically founded the local chapter of Pride ERG, which is for LGBTQ plus employees within the company in at our location here in Winston-Salem. And since then, I've been serving as the chair chapter. So a lot of the work is very similar. A lot of professional events, really focus on how to develop leadership for LGBTQ plus people. But on top of that, we also work with other ERGs. For example, we work with the women's ERG. We work with African American forums a lot. We also work with veterans. So we are not just focused on one particular area. We are really try to make diversity a thing, not just one area, but like diversity as a whole. More common, more perhaps more accepting as a company. So we have like airline training, speaker series, and outreach events. For example, we participated for the first time in our local Pride Parade and Fire Festival, and we talked to people about our experience. And what we really try to do is that we want to make ourselves as the image that people can see. Oh, if you're LGBTQ plus, or if you're people of color, you can be a leader or you can be a professional at our company. So that's one of the important missions. Next slide. So why we spending so much time on diversity or D&I? So people tend to be more passionate, more loyal to their jobs if they feel more respected, more included at their company, and in turn they feel more empowered. So this drives innovations for individuals. So if you're more if you feel more comfortable at your workplace, you are more motivated to deliver more results, if you can put it that way. And also employees from different backgrounds. So especially at my company, we have different nationalities or people coming from different status or different experience. So it's very important to generate an environment that you can have them work together and feel comfortable to express themselves, right? So after all, aerospace is a lot of the projects require like strong teamwork skills. So it's very critical to have that environment where everyone can feel respected and while they collaborate with each other. Next slide. Wait, your turn.
Yeah. so let me so I guess feel free to jump in if you have questions. Just go ahead and jump in the chat box there. If you have specific questions about how D&I connects to you, I know that we're talking here specifically. Alfred touched on his experience with the GLBTA, LGBT sort of activities within in the house. But what I want to take you through is how to look at a company's sort of leadership behavior. So what drives success within a company and how they're measuring their leaders and their employees and how that's connected to diversity and inclusion. The thing that's important to keep in mind here, and something that I wish I did more of when I was graduating from Illinois, is that you need to look at a company's culture to see if it's a match with your personal endeavors and what you want to accomplish as a professional. The thing you'll notice is that you'll be, again, in a small fish with a big pond, and there's a lot of older professionals at the company that are either available to mentor you or are able, or frankly, they're your competition at this point, right? So you need to form allies. You need to form sort of like your little communities within a company to be able to succeed and to be able to make the connections that will make you successful going forward. And one of these tools is sort of like, what initiatives does a company in-house have to allow you to make that community to help you grow and to help you foster the common interest that you have with them, right? So, for example, I've only worked for one company in my life, and it's been GE. All my co-ops and internships have been with GE, so I can give you the perspective of how the journey within GE has developed and what GE has in-house to demonstrate. But sort of do this own type of research with the companies that you're either interviewing with or you're thinking of. Do the research on how they're measuring their employees, like what structures do they have in-house to promote inclusion and diversity, and then what structures in-house do they have to make you be able to make those connections happen with other employees. What you'll notice as we go through the next few pages here is that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it doesn't talk about race, it doesn't talk about sexual orientation, it doesn't talk about gender. It talks about the commonalities that we have in terms of being able to respect each other, to have a voice in the workplace, and to be respected to have that voice, and to be invited to have those discussions and to have that voice in those discussions. So for example, GE, we have what we call our leadership behaviors. So this is what GE is expecting employees and leaders within the company to deliver on. So we're expected to act with humility, with with transparency, and to deliver with focus. So these are sort of like the three pillars that we're measured up upon as employees on a yearly basis. This takes into account like how we get promoted, how we get our salary increases, how we're evaluated with our peers. These are the three things that we're being looked at. Where D&I, diversity and inclusion, specifically fits in is with the first one, where it says act with humility. So GE has a structure out that says, in order to act with humility, we embrace a culture of respect, which values inclusive teams and diverse perspectives. You'll notice here that there's no mention of race, sexual orientation, gender. There's nothing that specifically calls out that says, what is diversity and what is inclusiveness? All that matters, and that frankly, what everything is evolving to is that you have a voice in the room and that you're invited and welcome to have that voice in the room and to be present in the room. And so then specifically for GE's embracing this as saying that you need to have a culture of respect, which values that inclusiveness and invites that diverse perspective on there. So as you're doing that research, if you value and you frankly, yeah, if you value and you want to harness that type of culture within your own personal work etiquette as you're growing as a professional, make sure to look out for companies that make a blatant statement that says that, yes, we're welcoming of diversity and we're encouraging our teams to be inclusive and to voice this diverse perspective on here.
Hey, Carlos, this is
yeah.
Tom Penn. Can I jump in for a sec?
Of course.
So your point
Please.
is a really good one, and I wanted to ask a question. I think you've answered it for GE, which my question is, do you think your companies sort of get it, or are they just ticking the box, to have ERGs? But in terms of when you're looking at a company, I think it's important to ask that question. But I think I'd like to hear your kind of perspective on how do you listen for the answer, because everybody's going to have an answer. But you need to be critical about whether it's genuine, or every HR person is going to have a standard line of "we value diversity," but then you might say, well, can you tell me how you value diversity, or what are your metrics, or because I spent 10 years with GE, so when I see your slides, I kind of get it, and I think it shows that they get it, and they've embedded it into their annual review processes and things. But do you have any advice on how to poke at that a little more with a company when you don't really understand it from the inside?
Sure, and I think, to be like fully transparent from the G perspective too, these are new behaviors that get published. So if you worked like 10 years, like even like 5 years ago with G, you wouldn't have seen these behaviors out there, right? So now with the change in sort of the culture of the new workforce that's coming in, where diversity is valued. And again, this is not diversity of sexual orientation, gender, or race, but this is just diversity of having different opinions in the room. You should look out for a company that has these type of behaviors to measure their population, their employee population. I think more companies are evolving into having this. So have that frank conversation of what does it, as an employee, how can I be successful as a professional in the company growing? And I think most companies will have a list of sort of like these list of behaviors that you're expected to be measured on to be successful. And if a company doesn't have those, or if the company hasn't cut up to having these type of things, I think it's a question of what type of resources are available for employees to connect with each other. Does this mean, are they offering like new graduates the opportunity to connect with each other in terms of having like young professionals at the city where you're being hired for them to connect and build relationships that way? Like, does a company sponsor a group like that? Is there a budget specified for that? At GE, when I first got hired, I didn't ask the questions about diversity. I think I was just happy, go lucky that after internships I got a full-time offer, and I was happy to go ahead and join in. And then after I was there for a couple of months, that's when I started discovering all these groups and all the initiatives. But I think asking the question up front of like, what groups does the company sponsor and what resources are available to me as an employee, I think should hint at how the company values and spends its time and money in terms of promoting discussions within similar like-minded individuals. I don't know, Thomas, if that makes sense for you as an answer, if that resonates, or if you have any.
Yeah, it helps. And I'm really looking. I'm really asking in the context of what kind of advice you can give to other students, because I'm kind of later into my career, and I've been an advocate for all of these things. And as an obvious white guy, I realize that I have to push in a different way, or in a more overt way, for diversity and inclusion. But I just want to get your guys' experience, and maybe some practical tips on questions to ask to kind of, and how to probe a little bit. Because I can hear in your answers that it's the, is it real? Is it embedded in the metrics? Is it, I also like the idea of inclusion being inclusive. I worked at Baxter for a while. We created a whole bunch of these ERGs, and it got to where there was like ERG confusion, and we were all members of several of them, and they were competing with each other to do the same thing for speakers and events. And eventually they said, look, let's pull this together and make it a central initiative, which I think is important. But it's just being a good customer of this, I guess I'd say, knowing what questions to ask, and knowing how to interpret the answers, because not all companies are this enlightened. I'm not saying this is the ultimate, but not all companies are enlightened. And the flip side of that is a lot of companies are not enlightened at all. And so you probably want to know that before you take a job there.
Yeah, I can give my perspective here. So for Collins, we try to push more for diversity, both in the fabrics, like right, so with our people managers, so our like hiring managers, both during interview and both when they're working. So a lot of the managers will now receive diversity training, at least from what I know so far. Also, they're trying to push for a more diverse interview panel for some, for particular positions. I don't have the specifics, but so don't quote me on that. But what we are really trying to do is that when people try to interview with us, we try to prove that we try to demonstrate to them that we have all these structures in place. We have the ERGs, which historically have very good track record of uniting people of different minorities or different affinity groups, and try to bring not just different diversity, but diversity as a whole together. If that makes sense. So I think these are the questions that students can ask their recruiters or their hiring managers if something like this is in place.
Yep. I think one other thing that's interesting too is there's a lot of watchdogs out there that measure how a company is performing in terms of their activities out in the world. So, for example, if you're interested specifically in our fields, like the LGBT sort of causes or diversity in that perspective, there's a human rights campaign, HRC, that measures a company's benefits to see how inclusive they are of employees in the LGBT world. Also, I would say don't hesitate to connect with. So if you're involved in college in organizations, most likely you'll be able to connect with employees that were part of your organization in college. This is both like hobbies that you're working on or specific to diversity and inclusion. Just reach out and ask the questions of how they feel the company values diversity and inclusion. The thing that you should realize is that you're going to be spending a majority of your time working for this company, so you do your due diligence to understand if your culture is compatible with the company's culture. Otherwise, if it's not, it's kind of not a happy place to be spending your time in. So just do that research on there, and there's a lot of resources. And if you have any questions, just reach out to me or Alfred in terms of how to do your due diligence, since we're connected on our company's initiatives of getting information out there. So we could give you ideas of how to probe at a company's stance on these issues when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Just continuing on with the Act with Humility thing at G, specifically of how we're embracing the culture of respect. These are some of the examples that we've given our employees and our leaders of how they could show this culture of respect and values. Again, you'll see that there's no mentions of race, sexual orientation, or any of that sense. The expectation is that every employee needs to treat other employees with respect and welcome the voice that's being said when appropriate. So, for example, an employee and a leader is expected to treat everybody with respect and fairness and holds others accountable in doing so. Or, for example, we're encouraged to solicit inputs from diverse perspectives, especially when weighing options and reaching decisions. So you'll notice there's a lot of triggering points here to have discussions with people that are not part of your organization. They're not part of the similar background that you have. And again, this is not inclusive of like sexual orientation and all those things, but this is to not create silos within the company itself and to promote the diverse voices in the room to have that discussion on here. So just for your curiosity of how we're embracing the culture of respect within our teams. The page here is just to give you some insights of what GE as a company as a whole believes and what they're standing for. So when you're doing your research, most companies out there have a stance of like an about us or what they believe in as their mission in the world. GE stands in a very clear stance and publishes this out in all the career websites that it has. But GE states that inclusion and diversity makes us competitive and creates value for our customers and shareholders and employees. So it's a very clear statement from the company that says what diversity brings to the table and the inclusion part of that. So when you're doing your research, make sure that if you're looking for something specific of diversity and inclusion, a company that clearly states this, is a sort of like a clear stance that the company is promoting this and there's a plan behind this. If not, go ahead and ask the question during your interview, or ask other employees if you're not comfortable with asking your interviewer on here. Like I mentioned, you'll be spending the majority of your time at this company, so make sure that the culture of the company connects with your own personal culture and your own personal interests, and how that connects on there. This last page on here is just to give you some insights of how GE is driving accountability within itself to drive this inclusion and diversity. So this is putting our actions to work and how our company is changing. Most of these initiatives are sort of have evolved within the year. So some of the things is that we're hiring a GE Chief Diversity Officer to oversee the company's diversity initiatives. We've aligned our businesses to have sponsorship for employee affinity networks. So these are the research groups. And frankly, we're evolving how we're looking at our employer base as well. So we're determining how we can responsibly and transparently share our diversity data. So this is to give insights to the rest of the world of how our key metrics of employee diversity, and this does mean in terms of gender and race and possibly even sexual orientation, of how we're trending to becoming more of a reflection of the population in-house. So take some of these sort of like talking points on here. I'm giving you examples of what GE does. Take these as sort of examples to think about how to frame your questions when you're talking to recruiters or people at career fairs. So see like how are your affinity network structured? Like who sponsors them in-house? Are they sponsored by like an executive or middle management person, or are they sponsored by the chief person that's running the business? Or ask them, like, when you're doing donations to the outside of the company, what type of funds are you funding, and what type of initiatives do you support outside of that? So take these as sort of like examples that GE is doing, and take them to and frame them as questions that you could ask your recruiters as examples of what a company could do. Any questions? Does that make sense, everybody? Or?
Yeah, Carlos, I'm just curious. Mike Barber's a guy that I worked with at Medical Systems, and I think he still has that role, but he is Chief Diversity Officer. This is a pretty new appointment. Has he been able to kind of reach out globally to GE yet, or is he still in the kind of formational state?
I think it's still in the forming states. There's nothing that's there's blurbs about it. He just got hired about a month or two ago into this position, so there's nothing
Okay.
big an issue that's going on there. Yep.
Can I jump in with a quick question?
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm looking at my former employer, Boeing, looking at their diversity website while you're talking. I never delved into it before. Thanks for pointing it out. They talk about something called Diversity Inc. Top 50 ranking. Is that anything useful? Do you know about it?
This is from this is the rankings of diversity, or this is the organization that looks at companies to make sure that they have diversity initiatives within in-house.
Okay,
yeah,
so
but
they use some kind of ranking to rank measurements of some sort.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Boeing says, I guess there's a top 50. I don't know, who knows out of how many hundreds. Anyway, Boeing says they're number 49. I'm not sure that's worth bragging about. I wonder where GE falls, if they've been ranked. Okay, thanks.
Sure. And I think the main takeaway on there is that there's organizations or nonprofits out there that are looking at this stuff with like a magnifying glass, because they're all trying to figure out. If you think about it too, it's the government spends a lot of federal money on these type of companies. For example, like Boeing's, like GE's, they're big federal contractors. So there's a lot of watch groups around it to make sure that the government is spending money in places that is worth spending money in their eyes, in their own public agendas, right? So just do some research on there. You'll find a lot of information. There's a lot of like juicy stuff that comes out. For example, like the Human Rights Campaign just updated their rankings. They have like 100% score, like 100-point scoring of all companies Some of the companies fell out because they just added on new requirements that are considered sort of like controversial for the rest of the world. And so companies are always trying to go ahead and update their requirements to meet the new watchdogs requirements, and there's a lot of conflicts on there, but it creates some interesting discussions, and just put in your company's name and then diversity, and you'll find a lot of juicy stuff out there. And so Alfred will take us through some of the resources for D&I.
Yeah, feel free to add in anytime, Carlos. So just bring us back to the point of, how do we go from academia to industry, and what kind of resources as a student that you can look for, right? So I will always start with student organizations at the school, for example, Society of Women Engineers or SHIP for Latinx, just a few examples. Those will have like good connections possibly with the national chapter or national group, or even some corporations that have connections with them. Those are great resources that you can talk to. As we mentioned, you can look at the diversity pages of the big corporations, or if you're looking for even smaller companies who have some mention if they're dedicated to diversity, that you can look at. For example, look at their diversity index. That gives you a sense of how committed and how they value diversity. We just mentioned that earlier. And also, for example, the Human Rights Campaign index, they also publish that as well. So we talk so much about corporations, right? So when you come down to a specific site, they may be more. They may be more active with diversity. They may be a little less, depending on what the corporation's value is. So another good resource is to ask your recruiter about if there's any employee resource groups, or if you can actually speak with someone from the ERG, right? So if, let's say, if a recruiter hit me up, hey, do you want to talk to this candidate about how it is here, to how it is working here? So I'll be glad to, right? So that's another resource that you can try to speak to. I don't know if you are in any of groups, but you can always go to national conferences of SHIP has their national conference. Out in Equal is like the LGBT national conference and then OSTEM has the national conference, right? So those are great opportunities to network with like-minded students, with other minority students, and also network with professionals, right? So one questions I always ask is, can you imagine yourself on the other side of the recruiting table of the company in 5 to 10 years? So can you imagine yourself being in that company and be maximizing your potential, essentially? Okay.
So Alfred,
yeah,
I've got a comment in terms of practicalities of this. So
yeah.
companies will have a company profile and ranking and policies and all that, but there's it may seem obvious, but if you're looking for a job and it's your first job, it may not be so obvious. So if you're with GE and you're at one of their global headquarters like medical in Waukesha, or aviation in Cincinnati or something, you're going to have people from all over the world, and they're going to have representation of the total corporation. So those would be fairly diverse and aware places, or at least sites for the company. But if you're at some remote manufacturing plant in South Carolina, or I'm not picking on any state, but if you're in a remote place that does only one thing, and it's manufacturing or service or something, you'll tend to get more of a monoculture or a local culture. So just be aware of that. GE, you can say something about GE or Baxter or Boeing or anybody, but if you're in an outpost that's very focused on one thing, you're probably not going to see as much of the corporation, and you're going to see more of the site. Okay, and so they're going to have different cultures, and they're going to be a different experience for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Even with my company, like we have a site just 100 miles down the road from here. It's a much smaller site, more manufacturing focused, and they have a very small local chapter of the prior ELG, and they have been constantly talking about their struggle just because of the local culture and how much they have to deal with to make their ALG work. So it really depends again on the local culture. Yeah, I totally agree. All right. So
Yeah,
you talk about Go ahead, Carlos.
Let me see if I can add something. Just really briefly, and I'm interested to hear on the students that are currently at Illinois. It's from the research that I've been reading, and I'm trying to go ahead and wrap my head around of how does the new generation of the workforce coming in, how do they fit into the D&I initiatives that a company has? And what the research says is that most of the new generation that's graduating, they don't want to put themselves in a box that says this is my label and this is what I belong in. They're more broad and less likely to even join an affinity or a resource group that's specific to a cause. And some of you might relate with this, where you might not want to label your specific diverse background or your diverse experiences, but you're more looking for a culture that's more welcoming or more embracing of having those different perspectives in the workforce. So you'll be more of a task than keep your eyes on or your ears on the ground for things that the company. So let me see how to phrase this. So you'll be more of the people on the ground, ensuring that the diversity and inclusion continues within the company. And what this includes, and this is sort of like to Thomas's perspective, is that when I first joined GE, like I had no experience of diversity and inclusion resource groups within GE, but I did have my ear to the ground, or I was a little bit like attuned to when certain instances in the workforce happened that went against sort of like diversity and inclusion. So this includes like as employees working with a global workforce. So if you're based, like I was based out of Cincinnati and you're talking to engineers in like Turkey and India, you're expected to go ahead and coordinate with those employees as if you're one team and one culture, which is really difficult, right? So to the older generations or the older engineers that I was working with, it was completely normal for them to make like comments about the way that people are talking or the way that they're expressing their cultures or the holidays that they're having, which was like completely normal. But for me, I was like this doesn't seem right. And I think the new generation and you guys that are coming in, you're going to even be more tuned into what discussions are considered appropriate and what discussions are not considered appropriate. And this might fall into like the bigger categories of like race, gender, and sexual orientation, but be prepared for those sort of type of scenarios and ask the questions that we discussed earlier about what does a company do to measure an employee's success. And you should be able to go ahead and start structuring your thought processes of how the company itself views that discussions like that should occur. So this is how company views with respect and integrity within the employee population. So just a quick tidbit that I thought of.
Yeah, good point. So going back to the slides, we talk about diversity index. That's very important because that sets metrics for corporations to follow. In order for a corporation to follow those metrics, they will have a set of system that for the other local sites have to meet. So in order to achieve that, so for example, 100% for HRC index, all the sites will have to be able to meet those standards, right? So that's a very good metric that you can look at. Oh, this should be a good company, even though it might be less, or more. You always get the plus minus, right? So, but generally, that's a good way to look at it. Last but not least, LinkedIn is always good to network with people, especially say you go to conference and you meet someone and want to stay connected and see if there's any opportunities. So definitely use it. And at the end of the day, you really want to be able to join a company. Like Carlos said, you're going to be spending hours, it's 40, 60 hours a week, I don't know, depending on which company you join, but you want to be able to join a company where if you go to your break room and have a small coffee conversation with your coworkers, you want to be able to not feel that you have to hide yourself. You feel fully accepted, and that's an environment that you can maximize your potential, right? So yeah, I think that's it on our presentation.
All right, thank you, Alfred and Carlos. I'm going to open it up for questions. Again, not that we haven't been chatting this whole time, but before we do that, I want to make sure that we get to the two diversity-focused organizations that aerospace engineering has within the department. And to share with us about WIA, one you probably know of, Sita Chilichama is going to speak for just a few minutes on women in aerospace and what their organization does.
Hello, everyone. Courtney, I think you got our names mixed up because Sita was also here, but she left, but it's fine. So my name's Ani, and I'm the secretary for WIA, and I'm here to tell you about who we are and what we do in WIA. Some of you may already heard this because I see some familiar faces from the trivia night, but WIA, also known as Women in Aerospace, is a registered student organization in our department. And our main goal is to provide a supportive resource for the current aerospace students who are women. And also our main events are outreach events. So we're trying to increase the interest in female students in the aerospace area. And if you can show the next slide, I'll talk about more of our events and what we do. And there's also our contact information. And as I already said, our main events are outreach events. The biggest one is the Glass Day, which is for middle school girls. And we invite them on campus when it was in person, and we would have the whole day planned out for them, and we would teach them more about air stuff, space stuff, and they would have some activities, and they will do some teamwork and look at what it feels like to be an aerospace engineer. We also have some social events. We have happy hour, we have some game nights, professional development. We go to some conferences, and we also did fundraising this semester when we sold our merch, and all the profits went to Direct Relief, which is a nonprofit government organization, and it focuses on providing PPE for the places which needs them the most because of COVID. And this is our contact information. You can visit our website, or you can just email us at wiasecretary@gmail.com. Also, we have a mailing list, and if you want to get involved, you're definitely welcome to. You don't have to be a woman to get involved. We welcome everyone. So if you want to get involved, you can also drop your email in the chat, and we will add you to our mailing list.
All right, thank you so much. And sorry for the mix up on
It's fine.
There is a new group called Marrow that was recently formed, and I'm going to let Esteban Lezama talk about that.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Esteban, and yes, it's a new group. It recently just formed about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So our focus is around minorities in aerospace because it's really underrepresented. So we try to develop like friendships and support groups, and we're still working out the kinks. And right now we're discussing like the future of the group. So we have a lot of opportunities for leadership and all that stuff. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So who we are, so we're made up mostly of students, faculty, and staff. So currently we have 36 members, and because of COVID right now, we're only meeting on Zoom every 2 weeks. So our next meeting would be November 16th. We meet every Monday at 5 p.m. or every other Monday at 5 p.m. So right now in our meetings, we're usually talking about social events that are going right now. Right now, big ones like the election, and we talk about things going on in the Department of Aerospace, and we play games like Among Us, and we're just gonna try and get to know each other since with COVID, it's hard to meet new people. Yeah, that's basically what we've been doing recently. And then if you go to the next slide. Yeah, this is the sign up. So it's a QR code. You can join our email list. Also, if you email Professor Saxton Fox, and that's basically it.
All right, thank you so much. If none of these groups is really what you're looking for, Engineering Council does also offer quite a number of groups. Give me just a second and I will share in the chat box if you would prefer to go out to Engineering Council and look through some of those student organizations. Many of them have a diversity focus, and you'll be able to find a place where you fit, hopefully. So I'm going to open this up for questions for Alfred, Carlos, or for Ani or Esteban. Any questions you might have about joining a group?
Yeah, I just want to add, if you don't have questions now, that's fine. If you have questions later, feel free to add me on LinkedIn, or whether it's career-related questions or on diversity or on Collins Aerospace, or just, anything.
This is a quiet group all of a sudden. So if there are no other questions for today, I do just want to let everyone know we rescheduled the mentorship and networking seminar that was supposed to happen last Thursday. It will happen next Wednesday, November 11th at 5:15 p.m. Central. Tracy Elving and Paula Besson will be our guest speakers for that event. And we hope to see you all there. That is our seminar for today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good day.